As fans, and I think particularly as Star Trek fans, a lot of us develop what we would call parasocial relationships with the performers who bring our favourite characters to life. I will admit I am very guilty of this, as indeed are many of us here on the team. With that, we went into this documentary with some assumptions, if you like, about William Shatner, a lot of which I found being turned around and changed when I watched You Can Call Me Bill. What does William Shatner need with another documentary? You might well ask. He certainly forged a lot of his prolific career on factual programming. He currently hosts the docu-series The Unexplained on the History Channel. He's also produced Star Trek documentaries like Chaos on the Bridge and the often underrated The Captains. Most of these, however, are framed away from William Shatner, and that's the difference when it comes to You Can Call Me Bill. You Can Call Me Bill does the opposite. It turns the focus inward toward Shatner himself. It's elegantly directed, it's sometimes irreverent, sometimes funny, and overall profoundly moving. This is the latest documentary from director Alexandre O'Philippe, a Legion M Exhibit A Pictures production. It's a philosophical trip through the life and career of William Shatner. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are the 10 biggest takeaways from You Can Call Me Bill. Before we go straight into the list though, we'd like to share this exclusive clip with you.
It's a delicate balance everywhere. And the moment you lose that balance, you lose the laugh, you lose the continuity, you lose the character. Everything goes out the window. That first laugh, it's like suckling on mother's milk. It's just,
ladies and gentlemen, William Shatner.
Empowering.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The producer said, we'd like you to do the opening for George Lucas's Lifetime Achievement Award. And the sketch for me, it was literally a sketch. You go out there and act as though you're at a Star Trek convention.
Star Trek changed everything. And aren't these conventions wonderful?
And then discover that it's Star Wars, and then get off as fast as you can. So I take a piece of paper out of my hand.
Mr. Shatner, we want you to open the show. Star Wars?
And they got it. And they started to laugh. And the moment they started to laugh, I realized that I had them, because that's a very delicate balance. Imagine if they didn't get it.
Number 10, By Any Other Name. The documentary is not just about Bill, but it needs Bill for his openness, for his irreverence, for his candor, and for his view on the universe as it is, and as he predicts it may yet be. You Can Call Me Bill is also about Shatner's career, but it is not about, say, You Can Call Me Kirk or Denny or TJ Hooker. I suppose one of the questions going in that I had was, why now? As Shatner himself explained to Cinema Blend's Mick Jost, he had strayed away from doing intimate documentaries before because they seemed so final. Now, however, in his own words, at this age, maybe it's time to put it down on film what I feel. What I was doing was telling the honest truth, unadulterated by, I wonder what people will think, so that my family, in the years to come, will have some kind of legacy from me. This is personal. By that name, this is Bill. Number 9, Shatnerian. A person has truly achieved legendary status when they have their own adjective. By now, however, Shatner is probably the least Shatnerian of those who would attempt to claim the adjective as their own. The actor has been parodied and his trademark staccato done to death over the years so many times that, as we see in You Can Call Me Bill, The actor has started parodying the parodies. Shatner doesn't see it, his Shatnerisms, as he kind of knowingly puts it in You Can Call Me Bill, but at this stage he takes it all in his stride. And funnily enough, it's that playful use of irony that is perhaps the most Shatnerian Shatnerism of them all. Irony is a skill that Shatner has down to a fine art. It's also one that, if you know where to look, hides a great deal of self-deprecation. Shatner is eminently aware of his Shatnerness, perceived or real. Maybe just don't take him so Shatnerly. For any actor, before pastiche comes the mask, something that You Can Call Me Bill highlights so effectively. Shatner has worn quite a few of them throughout his career, but as he points out, we all do this as well. Humor might well be another mask, but it's one that Shatner appreciates, and one that he feels he was able to balance, particularly in his performance as Captain Kirk. Finally, in the hyperbolic of Shatnerian, You Can Call Me Bill knows that, in spite of a desire to get to the honest truth, all You Can Call Me can do is give us versions of Bill. Number 8. They are Legion. In its earliest days, Star Trek helped to define what fan phenomenon really means. Let us not forget, of course, the amazing B. Joe Trimble and the sadly departed John Trimble, who spearheaded the letter-writing campaign that quite literally saved the show from cancellation. Then the storming ratings of reruns and the emergence of the Star Trek conventions in the 1970s gave the show a second life, and history is still being written. The production company behind You Can Call Me Bill, Legion M, continues that fan spirit by being the first production company designed to be owned by fans. There are over 40,000 investors at present. As Shatner told the Today program, that original idea was one of the things that convinced him to actually take on the project. The writer and director, Alexandre O'Philippe, is certainly a science fiction fan by all accounts, having previously directed Memory, The Origins of Alien, and The People vs. George Lucas. One of Philippe's earliest documentaries, Earthlings, Ugly Bags of Mostly Water, was also about Star Trek fans. That documentary primarily follows Klingon speakers of the Klingon Language Institute, and also features someone who is arguably the father of the Klingon language as we know it, Mark Okrand. And a certain Klingon himself, Michael Dorn, features also. Number 7. Risk is the business. You Can Call Me Bill is not about Star Trek, but it's hardly a surprise that Captain Kirk comes up quite a bit. There is one scene that comes up quite a bit in You Can Call Me Bill, and that is the "Risk is our business" speech from Return to Tomorrow. We're even shown one of the alternate takes that wasn't used in the final episode. If the documentary takes pains to highlight Kirk's famous ethos for becoming a Starfleet officer, then it is to show as well that William Shatner has taken quite a few personal and professional risks in his career. As the promotional synopsis for You Can Call Me Bill puts it, Bill rides horses every morning, ran atop a speeding train, stood alone on a rumbling 14,000-foot glacier, fearlessly drove racing cars and motorcycles, swam with sharks on his 90th birthday, and is now the oldest man to have ever ventured into space. Shatner, like Kirk, is well aware of the enormous danger potential, but like Kirk, that has never stopped him from taking those risks, or, as Bill puts it in the documentary, from living in the now. It was, in fact, this sense of being present that Shatner feels he believes he brought to the role of Captain Kirk. As Shatner describes it, so long as Captain Kirk had command presence, the implicit trust of his crew, he could afford to be the Joker, to have moments of levity in amongst much more serious things. Compared to Star Trek's first pilot, Shatner believed that he brought a bit more comedy to the role, and that sense of it didn't have to be everyone standing around going, "We're on a mission." Number 6. Spaceman Down to Earth. On the 13th of October 2021, William Shatner, then aged 90, became the oldest living human to ever travel into space. The brief time spent in weightlessness before coming back down to terra firma makes up a large part of You Can Call Me Bill. So fragile, so blue, so Bill. Long before the Musks and the Bezoses of the world got involved, the cast of Star Trek the original series were deeply involved in NASA and the space race. Nichelle Nichols in particular did groundbreaking work in the 1970s with NASA, helping to recruit more women and minority peoples into the organization. As Shatner recalls in the documentary, when the ratings for Star Trek went up, the government would vote to give more money to organizations like NASA. It was like a self-energizing loop. The very last episode of the original series aired barely 1 month before Neil Armstrong took his first steps on the moon. Just about 2 years previous to this, Shatner was invited to Kennedy Space Center, where they literally rolled out the red carpet. Perhaps what is very surprising is that while this was happening, when Star Trek was cancelled, Shatner found himself living in a beat-up old pickup truck that he purchased, with no money, having gone through a divorce, and watching that moon landing on a little 4-inch TV screen that he was able to watch in his car. As he discusses in the documentary, and has discussed before, because of the Apollo program's connection to Star Trek, he felt as he watched that moon landing that he was a teeny, infinitesimally small part of him landing on the moon. And I'm here and he's there. As I went to sleep, I thought of the irony of it. There I was, in a giant lifetime coincidence of symmetry, of chance. Of course, thankfully times would change for Shatner. He would travel back into space several more times, first in animated form, then of course through reruns, and eventually through the movies that would begin from the motion picture onwards. His real trip, much later on to the boundary, would have a profound impact on him, an existential crisis if you will. Number 5. Of Gods and Starships. Cybok wasn't necessarily here this time to dredge up old memories, but many of us will have seen the images of a very emotional William Shatner delivering the impact of what he felt when he came back down to Earth to a decidedly less than impressed Jeff Bezos. Not unlike the meeting of a god who suddenly needed a starship in Star Trek V, this difference between fiction and reality clearly moved the man deeply. As he told The Guardian in 2022, "I went to space. After decades of playing a science fiction character who was exploring the universe and building connections with many diverse life forms and cultures, I thought I would experience a similar feeling, a deep connection with the immensity around us, a deep call for endless exploration, a call to indeed boldly go where no one had gone before. I was absolutely wrong." As Shatner then related in You Can Call Me Bill and in his book, Boldly Go, Reflections on a Life of Awe and Wonder, "When I looked into space, there was no mystery, no majestic awe to behold. All I saw was death." When he looked back down at the Earth, Shatner realized that the beauty wasn't out there in space. It was back down on Earth, surrounding us, in all of us. He realized then just how fragile the Earth was. Things like this led to what he describes in the documentary as him living in grief for the Earth. Of course, you don't need to go to space to come to the same conclusion. After all, Star Trek, like any other form of fiction, is the story of our own understanding of the universe. Star Trek just uses starships to tell it. Number 4. Oh my. William Shatner has spoken a lot about Star Trek Generations through the years, and in particular about Kirk's death scene. While promoting You Can Call Me Bill, Shatner got stopped on Jimmy Kimmel Live, where he was surprised with a birthday cake and the chance to redo that scene. If Shatner wants another crack at that scene, it's because he wasn't happy with how it came out. "It was a little darker than I intended it to be," he says. His delivery of "oh my" seems slightly overwhelming, as if the darkness is rushing in, where what he wanted to do was have Kirk greet death with the same adventurous spirit that Kirk lived in. That his "oh my" would be something more of an "oh my." Nonetheless, this darker take is the version that appears in the film. Maybe that's the way it should be, Shatner goes on to add. Now, maybe there are many of us who would prefer that Kirk didn't die at all in Generations, although that's fodder for another video. But of course, Shatner did revive Kirk, if not on stage, then at least on the page. Number 3. The Age of De-Aging. William Shatner has written the return of Captain Kirk in his novels as part of the Shatnerverse, in, fittingly, the novel The Return. But he hasn't actually played the captain since that time in Star Trek Generations. Shatner recently told the Canadian press that he would take on the role again if the idea was right. It's almost impossible, but It was a great role and so well written, and if there were a reason to be there, not just to make a cameo appearance, but if there were a genuine reason for the character appearing, I might consider it. Shatner is also a new spokesperson for Otoy, which has worked with the Roddenberry estate for years to preserve Gene Roddenberry's legacy. We've seen such things as the recreation of all of the bridges, and of course that stunning new version of the Enterprise J. More recently, and perhaps more fittingly for this video, they released the short film Regeneration, which saw, through the use of incredible prosthetics and a little bit of touching up with CGI, the resurrection, if you will, of Leonard Nimoy, brought back to look as he did in his appearances in the latter Star Trek films and indeed the Next Generation's unification. This short film borrows a little from Shatner's Ashes of Eden novel that sees Spock returning to Kirk's cairn on Veridian 3. Otoy specializes in this de-aging technology, which can take 10, 20, 30, 40 years off you, Shatner joked with the Canadian press. He then went on to postulate a possibility for Kirk's return. A company that wants to freeze my body and my brain for the future. We've got Captain Kirk's brain frozen here. There's a scenario. Let's see if we can bring back a little bit of this, a little salt, a little pepper. Oh, look at that, here comes Captain Kirk. In reality, we know where Captain Kirk's body is. It's on Daystrom Station, along with the Genesis torpedo and an attack tribble. Number 2, Spore Drive. Do us a quick favor, would you? This will make more sense when you watch You Can Call Me Bill. You might already be familiar with this if you're familiar with William Shatner's extensive musical repertoire. Take a pause for a moment, go outside, or even pull up Google Images, and just take a look, take a real long look at a tree. Now, I'm not just doing this for the hell of it. It's not a wishy-washy, greeny request, and also, I Want to Be a Tree is not a title of a track from Shatner's So Fragile, So Blue album. Shatner really does want to be a tree, at least to the extent that anyone possibly can. He has made plans in death not to be blasted into space, as I think many of us might have been expecting, but instead he wants to be cremated and put in a bag, an open bag, that would then nourish a redwood tree to then grow up out of his remains. I want to be a tree. You can sit right down under my shade. That'll be enough for me, as the lyrics go. And you know what, if his friends were still around to sing a rousing chorus of row, row, row your boat, I think Captain Kirk might be very much on board with this idea as well. If all of this is about introspection, it is also equally about connection, and about life, as it is as much about death. You Can Call Me Bill begins with trees, as Shatner discusses the mycorrhizal link that connects them all. I'd like to think there's a lattice work to the universe, he says. It is this interconnectedness in nature, and particularly between human beings and nature, that Shatner, I think, most openly sees in his connection with horses, that drives the documentary itself. If this lattice work in the universe is familiar to you, it might be because, and although this wasn't the point that Shatner was trying to make, because that idea makes up an awful lot of what makes Star Trek Discovery tick. Recently, of course, Shatner garnered some criticism, as he often does, but particularly about comments about Discovery that he said might see Gene Roddenberry turning in his grave. But as he clarified to Cinema Blend's Mick Jost, this comment was more on a certain lapse of military protocol, as he saw it in Star Trek Discovery. Number 1, verbs of passion. I haven't changed the world, Shatner stresses as You Can Call Me Bill draws to a close. This is not any kind of faux self-effacement on his part. It's something he's very clear about. There is in fact a more nihilistic sense to what Shatner is talking about. As he discussed in the documentary, humankind is currently facing and is the cause of mass extinction on this planet. It is something that deeply concerns him and is a thread that runs throughout the documentary. This in part fuels comments like where he says, "We live in grief for a good deal of life. We all, no matter what, fade into oblivion after a certain amount of time." He talks specifically about inspirations in his life, like Laurence Olivier or Marlon Brando, who for him were huge giants of the stage and screen, and now, years after their death, they have begun to fade. To his mind, the only thing that remains are the good deeds that we do in life. That, he hopes, will be his legacy. And the tree, of course. Inasmuch as Shatner does broach the topic of death openly and honestly in You Can Call Me Bill, he doesn't shy away from living life either. I don't want to leave, I'm having too good of a time, he says. He says that now in his 90s he's more active than he's ever been. To return to the hyperbolic for a moment, there's little more Shatnerian than the spoken word albums that he's released over the years, which have of course been parodied and parodied, but here, framed in this documentary, you get a certain sense of appreciation for them, which you may not have had before. The man who played Captain Kirk is still living his life in such a way that he is going boldly each and every day. He might doubt his impact on the world, but we don't. You can rent or buy You Can Call Me Bill on most digital platforms, and you can stream it on Prime Video from the 27th of May. The Blu-ray will be available from the 3rd of June. And just really quickly, as a small personal note to close out this video, this was a deeply moving documentary, much more so than I anticipated, with far less Star Trek in it than perhaps I thought. I really, really recommend it. Thanks so much everyone for watching along. Massive thank you to Jack Kiley, who wrote the article that this was based on as well, and apologies to Jack for some liberties that I certainly took while making this video. Thank you so much to Chris, who's had to put all of this together into a video as well. You're a gentleman. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Make sure that you have your notifications switched on so you'll get a little note every time we post a new video. Make sure that you're following us on the various socials at TrekCulture. You'll find us there, and you can find all of our individuals through that as well. This has been a slightly different video from the ones we normally do, so I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you do get around to watching the documentary, do let us know what you thought about it in the comments below. You are wonderful. Make sure that you live long and prosper. I think that would be very fitting for the video that this is. Thank you so much, everyone.